Well, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. It's really great to be in Korea. It's not the first time for me in Korea. Actually, it's the first time for me in Asia. I'm going to tell you something about startup-driven innovation in maritime. But first, I want to tell you a story of a child who's been for his lifetime on ships. It's a very short story, I promise. And he turned out that he built ships, he designed ships, he designed ports, and he designs and built ports. And eventually, well, you can imagine who's this guy. Eventually, but it's me, started working with startups since 2009 on lean startup methodology, bringing it from the States to Europe. More recently, I found the Startup WOF, which is the world's first, I like to say, maritime-only hub for startups and maritime innovation. And very recently, actually, it's just out of the press, quite literally. Yesterday went out of the press, a report on frictionless trade that we published in the UK. And actually, the PDF is going to be available very soon, and I will share it with the organizers so you can have it. But okay, so much about stories about myself, but another story. This is a story of a startup, and it's a story of an American guy, actually two brothers, who had an interesting business, which is pretty normal in the States, that is buying some goods in China, importing them to the States, and then selling them through the internet. Super simple business. The only thing is that importing goods from China to the States is a nightmare. All the logistic chain, but most importantly, all the documents is complete nightmare. And this guy, who is entrepreneurial, he said to himself, well, what if I do something, automate this process somehow, so to make it easier for me? And with this, Flexport was born in 2013, the first digital freight forwarder. And it's interesting to notice that the founder, Ryan Peterson, says, literally, I didn't learn what the term freight forwarding meant until a year into starting a business. So now, freight forwarding, shipping, logistics are industries that have been doing the same thing for ages and without changes from outside, because it was very difficult to enter the industry. For new entrants, it was almost impossible to gain any advantage. Now it happens that a guy with no idea of what freight forwarding meant created a business. And he created a business that today, actually last year, was valued at 800 million. It is almost $1 billion. Created out of not knowing what freight forwarding means. And it's a business that last year was moving 7,000 TEUs per month, which is not a big figure. It represents approximately 1.8% of total trade of the global freight forwarders. But still, it is a dent in an industry that thought it was unassailable. So now, the same is happening also for shipping and for all other maritime-related industries. So, in a way, is it scary? Probably, for corporates. And it's inspirational for startups. Scary, because we are not protected anymore by being the only ones who know how to run this business. Even someone else with an idea that he can apply in digital can become a competitor. So what should a company do? What should a corporate do? Well, they could do nothing. Many say, I don't do anything. I just wait and see till it's too late, perhaps. or they do it yourself. They do innovation inside. But there are other levels of different things that can be done within the corporate to be innovative, like a startup. We'll get to it later. And from the perspective instead of startups, well, that's inspirational. Even two guys, well, typical in the garage, they were not in a garage, but the story is the same. Two guys with little funds are able to create an empire worth 1 billion. So what should a startup do? Get a slice of the action, at least, or perhaps aim to become a unicorn, like they are almost there. Also for startups, there are decisions to take. But now I mentioned this word, startups. Startups, they know what they are, but for the industry, it's a pretty new term. So what is a startup? There is a definition of a startup by Steve Blank. That is, a startup is a temporary organization to discover a business model that is profitable, repeatable, and scalable. Now, what's the point of this? I went to business school in 1999. It's the last century, but actually I say it's last millennium because it's so far away, so different from now. And I studied entrepreneurship. And what did I study? I studied that an entrepreneur is someone who has an idea, one, okay, check, who writes down a business plan, okay, and what does the business plan say? The business plan forecasts the growth of the company in the next 3 years and plans exactly whatever you are going to do in these 3 years to get there. And then just a matter of finding funds and executing. Well, this is what I was taught, and thousands of other people were taught about entrepreneurship. Well, turns out that Steve Blank discovered that most likely this idea is wrong as it stands. It's wrong because he said a startup is not a small version of a large company. A startup is something else. A large company is a company that runs a business, runs some plans, and then executes the plans. It's all about being able to execute flawlessly a plan that is very clear. Because my business is very clear. I know what my business does. And that's how a company runs. Now, a startup is not like that. Because a startup doesn't know yet exactly how its business will work. A startup can think, can foresee that they will have some things to do and that their business will work in a certain way. But then, when they are confronted with reality and they go out there and they really try to run this business, things work differently. Why? Well, because if it were so easy to forecast and know the reaction of the customers, the market, the competitors to your idea, if it were so easy, there wouldn't be entrepreneurship. It would be just, okay, let's do this. And it happens, it works, easy. It's not easy. It's not easy because things will not work out as you think they will. So this is why it is an organization to discover a business model. And it's temporary, of course, because hopefully you'll end up to a point where you'll know how your business works, exactly what it does, exactly how it interacts with the market, the customers, and so on. And at that point, you'll be in the position to run it as a large business, to run it by planning and most importantly, executing. The startup instead is about experimenting and learning to discover the answer of what is this startup going to do. So now, from what I'm saying, this is not for corporates. Well, I say, think again. What we've been seeing recently is that also corporates can benefit from thinking like a startup. Because I said, I discover a business model, then when I know that it works, I just execute it. Well, the market, the environment is changing so rapidly that whatever works today, and we work it again and again, tomorrow might not work anymore. So also the corporate has to have the mindset of a startup, of thinking, wait a minute, what if something changes? And what will they do if something changes in the environment, in new technologies, or in startups coming up, or whatever. The world is changing very, very fast, very fast. So, not for corporates, I say think again. And I tell you another story. It's a story of a corporate innovator. Now you can see from the colors and the two big O's, it's a story that is about Google. And the story is about Alberto Savoia. Alberto Savoia was a Googler, but has a long history. In 1999 to 2001, in the dot-com bubble, he created a startup. And he raised a lot of funds, and he was able to sell it for 100 million. Wow, he said, wow, that's easy. At that time, if you did it and you succeeded, sounded easy. So next step, he went to Google, 2001 to 2002, and he was the technical director of the group that created AdWords. AdWords is the first and most important part of Google business that creates money, that they create revenues. It was the first time when Google started creating revenues. So he was the tech director of this great innovation, and wow, he says, I'm good. You know? Next step, so he leaves Google 2002, and till 2008, he's in another startup 2. He raises 25 million in 3 rounds, series A, B, and C. After 5 years, value of the company, 0. Disaster. So he goes, WTF. But he redefines WTF. It's why the failure. And why the failure? Why did I fail? It looks so easy. Well, how is it? I did the same thing as always. Plan, execute. This is the idea, business plan, execute, succeed. Should work. It didn't work. And he went back to Google as corporate innovation director, and he called himself student of new product failure. And the question was, why new products fail? Why? And he came up with a series of ideas, which are pretty interesting. So, how is the traditional innovation process? As we said, I have an idea, most likely I love it, I build it, then when the product is ready, product or service is ready, I sell it. Easy. What happens? 80% of the times, fail. 80% of the time, the nice bulb that I had in my mind breaks down. Just 20% of times, it is a success. How come? 80% of innovations fail. And so this is a flop. And Alberto asked himself, why does a company flops? And it's because of failure in launch, operations, or premises. What does this mean? Well, operations, easy. I have to run the business properly. If I'm not able to run the business properly, good luck, you won't succeed. That's easy, that's obvious. Launch, I have to launch it properly. I have to market it so that it gets to the customers, and so on. So also this, in a way, it's not easy to do, but it's simple to understand. But he realized that there was a third point, the P of flop, that was missing. Premises. Too many times, well, particularly at Google at that time, too many times, the idea was brilliant, but was for its own sake. It didn't build on strong premises about the market wanting it. Okay? So the question is, how do you know if the premises of a business, of an idea are correct? Well, he says, don't ask. But don't ask me. Don't ask literally. Don't go out and ask customers, would you buy this? Would you like that? Because this is the traditional way that we've always been taught, do your market research, but itself, just if you take it just itself, it doesn't work. It's not enough. You can get positives, negatives. Actually, you enter, he calls it, you enter in thought land, the land of thoughts, because you have opinions about ideas, and you can have false positives and false negatives. What is a false positive? Well, for example, you might remember the Segway, that thing with 2 wheels that you step on and you go around, and it's super cool. Only thing, the market didn't want it. They were planning to sell billions for billions of value, and they sold few hundred millions of value of Segways. Now you see around, but it's not that common as they hoped it to be. But you ask someone, you ask me, you ask anyone, would you like this? This is so cool. And yes, of course, I want it. But then when's the time to buy it? They don't buy it. Or false negatives, even worse. Imagine, well, now it's 15 years ago. 15 years ago, someone comes to you and tells you, look, I have a great idea. I want to create an app. Well, we didn't have apps. I want to create a website where you can send your SMS to the website, and the website retransmits it to the world. And you go, sorry, are you stupid or what? What is this? Why should I send my SMS to the world? And so you kill the idea. And the idea turns out that it's Twitter. I describe Twitter, okay? I send an SMS to the world. But when I describe it, it is a stupid idea that I wouldn't do it. But then when it happens, when it is there, everybody wants to be on that. And actually, Twitter changed the way information works. So, you can get false positives, false negatives. So the only way to know, so what you want to achieve is that you make sure you build the right thing, the right it, as he calls it, before you build it right. So before you put your energy, effort into building something, into building a product, building a service, you want first to make sure that you are building the right product for the market. Okay? So make sure you build the right it before you build it right. And so he created this word that is not prototyping, which is, we've been talking about prototyping forever. You prototype something because you want to see if it works. But if it works like a machine, the machine works. Okay. You want to do it even before, and so is like doing something before. Before building the machine, you want to see if the market wants it. And actually, it turns out that it's a much cheaper alternative. It can be much cheaper to test the market before building the product. Test the market not just by asking, but by testing the market. How? With a prototype. Now let's see what prototypes are. So prototypes are a set of experimental techniques to validate the market appeal and actual use of an innovation as objectively as possible, and with the minimum investment of time and money. Now, there are several techniques. He came up with 6. You could say there are more. Fake door, mechanical Turk, impersonator, Pinocchio, one-night stand, minimum viable product. I think that everybody heard about the minimum viable product from the lean startup of Eric Ries. And the minimum viable product is the closest thing to a product. But there are other things that you can do before having a product. Now, as an example, I will show you how you could do a mechanical Turk. Actually, I will tell you a story in the story, and it's a story about IBM in the 80s. IBM in the 80s was a different company from what it is today. It was not a consulting company. It was a big computer company. And IBM stands for International Business Machines, and business machines are basically typewriters. Okay? So they were doing typewriters and computers. Someone has an idea. Say, we are the leader in these two categories. What if we create a typewriter? We replace a typewriter with a device where a person dictates something in a microphone, and the machine spits out the result in text format, on the screen, on paper. So the manager will be able to write a letter without the use of a secretary. Okay? Sounds dull to me, but at that time it was very, very interesting. It was very, very forward-looking. Now today we know if they tried to do it, they would have failed miserably, because it's just a few years that we have decent speech-to-text conversion. Before it was a nightmare. But still, they didn't know it. They thought, we put enough money into this project, we'll be able to do it. Okay. So it would have worked like this. The person speaks into the microphone, this gets into a computer somehow, it's not in the cloud, that's an idea of his thinking, it's in a computer, and you get the result on the screen. They asked their customers, would you love this? Would you like this? More than 80%, almost 90% of the customers said, yes, we would buy it. We would spend whatever it costs, we buy it. So what you do with the traditional way of thinking? You go and buy it and build it, and then you'll sell it. Because the customers told you already they are interested. Instead, they did something different. In a way, they did what prototyping tells you and what startups today do. They didn't realize it was so innovative as a way of thinking, but they said, wait a minute, let's run a trial. Let's create an office space in our buildings where we'll invite some of our clients to move their office, one small office, into our building, and in our building, they will be able to use this machine and tell us how they like it. And this is what they did. They created this office, they invited the customers, and there were microphones, there were screens and printers, and the machine worked. But wait a minute. They didn't build it yet. In fact, what they did was that the microphones were just listened to by a typist behind the wall who would type whatever the person was speaking. So you say, well, this is cheating. Well, yes, they were not paying for this, but they were using this. And the customers who were there didn't know of this, and they were using it. And what IBM was testing is, would they use it? Would it be really good to use as they think that it would? Well, it happens, it was from the perspective of the client, this experiment was a failure. Customers hated to talk into a microphone and to see the thing coming out on a screen and have little control on, backspace, cancel, whatever. It was so difficult to use. And so they scrapped the project. And they saved themselves millions of development for a product that wouldn't have worked. Meaning that even if it worked technically, even if the prototype was perfect, in practice, the user wouldn't like it, wouldn't have liked it. Okay? So they did this experiment, and this is the type of experiment that prototyping suggests to do. Run experiments in the most ethical way, of course. You don't sell this, because you're not selling anything. But you have customers use it. And you want to test your assumption, the assumption that you're making about your customer, is correct or not, is validated or not. Not about your product, about your customer using your product, which is different. Okay, so this is an example from the 80s. Now he says, do it. Whenever you have an idea, test it. And actually, this is what some startups with interesting ideas of, for example, online marketplaces or services that online, you input some data, you get out some output. They can do it without developing the back end of the program where maybe there is some complex calculation that we don't even know how to do this calculation, but we know how to simulate it by doing it by hand with few customers. And they do it, they test it. You create a front end, customers interact with the front end, and on the back end, there is not a big machine, super AI thinking. No, it's you. You who are making the adding value to the customer through that interface. And you see if the customer wants it, if you see and check whether the customer likes it. And then, when you see the customer love it, okay, you'll build the AI backend. But not before. No need to do it before, because it might be too expensive, and the customer might not want it eventually. So, an innovative company, be it a startup, be it a corporate, is always in discovery mode. Always in discovery mode. Always with this mindset of working in parallel, building the product, but also selling it, not selling in the sense of getting money out of it, but interacting with the customers and getting the product in the hands of the customers as soon as possible. And this product in this configuration wouldn't work. Okay, I drop it. I change something, and I go to the next step. And I iterate till the point where I find the product that the customer really wants. And at that point, I'm unsuccessful. I'm increasing my chances of success. Of course, here I have 4 failures. But what's the problem? I'm happy to fail small with little investment rather than to fail big. These are like sort of development costs. So an innovative company is always in discovery mode. So what should a corporate and what should a startup do with this changing environment, and particularly for corporates, how they engage with startups? So in maritime, there are examples in all the range. There are many companies who are doing nothing, which are doing nothing. Okay, let's wait and see. Let's wait till till it's too late. We'll see. On the other side, do it yourself. Do it yourself. There are a few companies who decided to create an incubation and acceleration facility. Not an incubation accelerator. A new startup development facility. For example, Wilhelmsen in Norway. And they developed their own new product, as a startup would do. It's very interesting. You have a lot of control over the results, but it's time-consuming. It's probably too risky in the sense that you are betting on 2 ideas that you are developing. You're putting all your energy into developing these 2 ideas. And what if you fail? Then others engage with startups directly. But this is a problem. Many times, the corporate and the startup speak a different language. Not in terms of speaking English or French or Korean. They think and reason differently. For what I said before, the corporate is so used to plan and execute, and they need to be very structured in whatever they do, because they need to be spotless. Everything has to work perfectly. The startups instead are more into this startup innovation mode and experimentation mode. And it's difficult for them to understand each other. They have different expectations of each other. And this is a serious problem for a corporate that wants to engage with a startup on their own. Because so many times corporates say, oh, I want to engage with a startup, how much does your product cost? Okay, go through the procurement process and we sign the contract. Thing is, a startup is not not even able to go through a procurement process. It's too cumbersome. Too many requests and too many things to comply with, that for a startup starting is almost impossible to become a supplier, a regular, normal supplier for a big company. Another way is engaged through a catalyst or an accelerator. Some companies create their own accelerators. Imagine Wärtsilä, imagine Maersk, they have their own accelerators. Usually these accelerators are run by external companies who are experts in creating and running accelerators, and they just pay hefty sums to have someone else run their acceleration programs. It's interesting, you have a lot of control, but for the startups it's not that great, because from outside you don't know which startups are participating in the program. And for the corporate it's interesting because you keep everything for yourself. But for the startups, say you have 10 startups, 2 will succeed, and the other 8 will be totally unknown to the market, and they might be interesting for someone else, but no one will know of them. And actually they will be already somehow engaged with this company, and things will be more difficult later on if they want to find more investment or anything. So there are pros and cons. Or working with an open accelerator, an accelerator that accepts applicants from everywhere, but also that is sponsored and financed by several corporates without exclusivity. That's more interesting for the startups. Of course, for the corporate, it's less interesting because they have less control. But again, it's a strategic decision. How far do you want to go in the scale? And yes, for the startups, what can they do? You do business development yourself. You partner with a catalyst or an accelerator, or you join a corporate accelerator. I said already the pros and cons for the startups as well. So here's a table. You'll see it in the download, which is saying what I just said. Suggestions for corporates: be ready and willing to change. People trained to understand the startups. Mutual learning attitude with the startups. Not think just as a procurement issue. Don't expect off-the-shelf products. They will need to be tuned. Simplified contracts with the startups. Ease of running pilots. Quick engagement process and agile decision making. I'm asking easy things, I know. But this is the way successful corporates manage to engage with startups. And startups reach out to clients early, as we said. Work to understand them, what they need. Make it easy for them to engage with you. Don't focus on your product, don't focus on features. They don't care, they want solutions. So focus on client issues and bring them a solution. First, know the client. Then get the product market fit soon. Well, we didn't say anything about product market fit, but startups will know what we mean. And then fully develop the product. First, product market fit, know that the market is right for you, and you are right for the market, and then fully develop the product. And that's it. Super easy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very inspiring keynote speech. Thank you.